Well, good morning and welcome back to CityLine. It is great to be in your home. Today is, believe it or not, the last day of February 28th, and so we are live. Before we start our show, I want to say a special thank you to Phaedra Rediford for sitting in for me last week when I was feeling under the weather. She is one of Metro Park's finest, and we love it when she can fill in for us here on CityLine. So Phaedra, thank you so much. We have a great hour ahead of us. Later on, we'll be talking with Rags Wearable Art. It is that time of year again, and if you are somebody who loves to wear art and jewelry and textiles and anything that you can put on your body is a definition of art, you don't want to miss this segment. And then Tools for Success is here. They have a conference coming up. I love their conference because it has some real hands-on tools and methods that people can walk away with, so you don't want to miss that. And the Northwest Furniture Bank, Bill and Jeremy are here to talk about their 12 years that they have been doing good works here in Tacoma, and the Chair Affair that they have coming up that you definitely want to get some tickets to. And then with me are two amazing individuals who are here to talk about Washington State, the prison, actually unlocking McNeil's past, the prison, the place, and the people. And this is the Washington State, of course, History Museum. Please join me in welcoming back Ms. Mary Michael Stump. Hello, my dear.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm very, very good. And of course, you are my Instagram friend. I love seeing you on Instagram.
We have Mutual Admiration Society going on online.
And for people who don't know it, your official title is Director of Audience Engagement for the Washington State Historical Society. So again, it's good to have you back on the comfy couch.
Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. You brought with you this wonderful woman, Simone Alicea. You are a reporter for 88.5 KNKX. Welcome, my dear.
Thanks so much for having us.
Great to have you here. Okay, shoe cam, put your shoe up. Yeah. These shoes, I don't know if we can get to them. Let's see or not. Lift it a little higher up.
A little higher up here?
There they are. Yeah, these are Ms. Moo's. No, we're not being paid for that, but you can run in those Mary Janes, can't you? Which is because you are a reporter, I would expect nothing less from you.
Oh, absolutely. Typically it's boots, but
yeah,
for you,
there we go.
shoes.
Yeah. So
this is not our typical research
footwear. So, Mary, give us a brief overview of what this exhibition is about, first off, and then what will visitors experience when they come to this exhibition?
So the exhibition is about the history of McNeil Island Prison, which spans 136 years of our state's history and reflects 136 years of our attitudes about how we punish people, what we do with them, mass incarceration, and how that's reflected in the physical space. So before Washington was a state, McNeil was built, and it became then a federal penitentiary when we became a state, and Walla Walla was our state prison. And then after that, it became a state prison, and then it was closed actually only in 2011. So you don't often get a physical space that spans that much time and reflects that many changes in societal views about mass incarceration.
Absolutely. We're showing some of the pictures here.
Those are the after shots. Those are Parker Miles Bohm, who is KNKX's photographer, went with us to all of our research trips out there and took some amazing photos. These are archival photos, but yeah, you can see, you can go all the way back to the late 19th century, up to, you know, whatever, a month ago or 2 months ago in terms of it. These are installation shots, so some of these are not necessarily the finished product, but I think your staff took some of this film when they were visiting the exhibition.
Good job. Really, really beautiful shots there. And some of the things that you are showing us have given me chills. And I wanted to ask you about that feeling of when you're in there and you're handling these artifacts. I mean, it's not something you take lightly.
No, it's a pretty heavy.
Yeah. This is a heavy
it's
subject.
pretty heavy feeling. But it also, the people who write the history are the people in charge. And so we really do say at the very beginning, we ask for people to think about the people whose voices aren't always necessarily represented, and to sort of take that into consideration. I think when you go through this exhibit and when you listen to the podcast that Simone and Paula Whistle worked on, you really get a sense of those human stories that we often forget about, where we're just not used to thinking about the individuals, both who ran the prison and who were incarcerated there, and then also the families of the victims
Yes,
of crime.
Absolutely. So Simone, how did KNKX decide to partner and produce a podcast series about McNeil? How'd that come to be?
So the museum approached us. Mary Michael approached the station. They were already working on this exhibit, and they said, we think this could be right for a podcast. And Matt Martinez, who's our director of content, saw some potential in this. Talked to me and Paula, who co-reported and co-hosts the podcast with me. And I think when Paula and I heard the story, we were immediately like, yes, this could be a podcast.
Yes.
Yes, people would want to listen to this. There are a lot of rich stories in this island's history.
I love that. So for folks perhaps who are wondering or maybe new to that phrase podcast,
Sure.
How does the podcast differ from the exhibition?
So the podcast is it's an audio story, right? It's imagine your favorite radio program. Sometimes I like to refer to the podcast as the McNeil Island Story Hour. Basically what it is it's 6 episodes. You can find them on any podcast app. And we go through all the stories, or many of the stories, definitely not all the stories, that we uncovered about McNeil Island. You get to hear from those voices, some of those voices that Mary Michael was talking about. We talked to guys who were locked up on the island when it was both a state and a federal prison. And we co-interviewed people. We talked to guards or former guards, and we talked to officials and other folks who can kind of give you a sense of what it was like in that space at those times. And so you really, really hear the people and their stories coming out in the podcast.
Which makes it even more alive and more relevant today. So Mary, because the prison was remote, I mean, it is an island, the guards and other people working at the prison, they actually lived on the island. What was it like for families who lived on McNeil Island?
It was a really tight-knit community. Many of those people who no longer live there today, when the state closed the prison in 2011, everybody who lived in the homes had to relocate off of the island. Although the homes are still there and they're boarded up, and it's almost
eerie,
post-apocalyptic.
Yes.
I mean, there are still some things but it was a really tight-knit community. There was a sort of almost odd relationship between the people who were incarcerated there. Certainly, when it was a federal penitentiary, we had, incarcerees working for the people who lived there. They drove the kids. They drove the bus to pick up the kids to take them to school. Public enemy number 1, Alvin Karpus, who had a nickname of Creepy, he was actually the bus driver that picked the kids up around and took them to, and he was doing time for federal, he was a head of a gang, a mob, he was a gangster. So it's a very compelling and interesting and just unique story, unique to Washington and its history.
Well, in addition to that, there was the Honor Farm, there's dairy, livestock, orchards, a ceramic studio, the foundry, a work ethics center, and it sounds like McNeil may have been more progressive, more of a progressive reform facility. Is that the case?
They were really progressive. I was actually really surprised when I read that research. They certainly, the idea of an honor farm wasn't unique to McNeil, but it was one of the very first federal penitentiaries that did that. And because it was an island, it was really necessary. So it was a very effective program. They made food for both the the prison, the community, and they made so much food on the Honor Farm that at one point they were sending that food to Fort Lewis.
Wow, that's lovely. I love that. So, Simone, drop some names for us here. Who were some notorious people that were incarcerated at McNeil? You've already mentioned one.
Have you ever heard of the Birdman of Alcatraz?
Oh, yes.
That phrase that comes to mind. So Birdman of Alcatraz, first of all, he didn't keep birds at Alcatraz. He kept birds at the federal prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. And before he was in Leavenworth, Kansas, he was on McNeil Island. It was actually the first place he was sent. He was sent there from Alaska in the early 1900s. Another story that we tell in the podcast is the story of Charles Manson. Charles Manson was incarcerated for most of his life before he was in California and started the sort of notorious cult. And as an adult, one of the first places he was incarcerated was the federal prison on McNeil Island in the early mid 60s. And it was there. One of the interesting things that I learned about Charles Manson is it was there that he discovered Scientology. It was there he learned, he sort of polished his guitar skills. He listened to the Beatles. In his cell, he listened to the Beatles. And so these things that became associated with how he was recruiting these young women and starting the cult in California were things that he actually learned in the prison on McNeil Island.
Wonderful. So we have less than a minute, and I know that we have been showing the website below both of your names where people can get information about how long the exhibition's going to be there, and the podcast, where to tune in. So last few minutes here, who do we need to thank, Simone?
I think definitely my colleague Paula Wissel, Matt Martinez at KNKX, and our editor Aaron Hennessy, and just everyone who did work on this podcast, from our composer to our mix engineer. There's a whole mess of folks who helped produce this podcast.
And Mary, who do we need to thank?
I want to thank KNKX. They have been amazing. I want to thank Humanities Washington. It also gave us a storytelling grant that helped fund the podcast in part. And then I want to thank Gwen Whiting, who is our lead curator at the museum, and Dave Beals, who was on staff at the museum and now works for the Secretary of State's office in the State Archives. But he really did a huge amount of research and worked with Simone and Paula to develop the basic aspects of the podcast before they took it away and made their magic. So
I love that.
It takes a village, and so there are many other folks we didn't mention, but those are the main ones. And thanks to Matt for catching my pitch.
Yes, and anybody who touched this program, I want to say thank you. Okay, last question for each of you, and it's not really a question. What is the one feeling that you want people to walk away with? One feeling.
Connection.
All right, what's your feeling?
I've said that if they say, I had no idea about that, then we will have done our job.
All right. Well, I want to say, first off, thank you for doing your job, because this is a beautiful opportunity to explore our past, our present, and that dictates our future. So thank you so much for giving voices to these stories and helping us understand these people's lives on this island, in and out of this prison. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the comfy couch, and I want you back here very soon.
I'll be here anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to do just a little bit of musical chairs, and when we come back, the Northwest Furniture Bank will be here in the house with Bill and Jeremy. You don't want to miss that. We'll be right back.